Let me introduce you to Daniel. Daniel's kind of an asshole, so nobody wants to spend time with him if they can help it. He's selfish, he's lazy, and he thinks he knows everything about trading in spite of being down 4,500% on stock options with his last $10 in Hertz. This is not an episode about Daniel because he's not interested in this boring shit. He's just here for the casino. Hey everybody, you're watching Sekiter, and this is episode 2 of our personal finance series, Micro. If this is your first time watching, this series is based on Siegel and Yacht's textbook Personal Finance published in 2009 and is being produced concurrently with our regular series on money management in Korea. If you'd rather watch that, then click on the link in the top right corner right now and go secure the bag. Otherwise, let's get into it. Now before we get into micro factors in personal finance, I want to do a thingy on macro versus micro. I realize that a lot of people may already be familiar with the terms macro and micro, but I'm not going to assume that everyone is, so let's just do a really quick rundown on the definitions. So, macro means very large in scale, while micro means very small in scale. This is pretty elementary. What actually complicates these categories is the massive gray area between very small and very large. How do we know if a factor, element, or phenomenon is macro or micro? You may come to think that one's view of these factors is contingent on our own personal perception. However, there are ways of objectively evaluating whether something is macro or micro, and it's necessary to do so when categorizing aspects of personal financial planning. Within this context, the term micro refers to the needs and standing of an individual person, company, industry, or establishment. That is to say, the micro factors apply to a small number of people or institutions, many of whom are likely to be invested in or beneficiaries of the subject being addressed. So, let me introduce you to my buddy Crescito. Crescito is nothing like Daniel. Daniel is out there chasing the lottery, while Crescito is just chilling at home watching Kubrick, thinking about the first trip he'll take once COVID is deaded. To finance that trip, Crescito is putting away 70% of his monthly income, which is something he can do because he's still single, lives at home, works at home, and isn't too attached to his job in the first place. The things that allow Crescito to save so much money can be considered micro factors because they're specific to him and don't necessarily affect anybody else's finances beyond his parents, who really don't seem to mind that he's at home. Conversely, Crescito is stuck in his house because of coronavirus, and the coronavirus can be considered a macro factor because it not only affects Crescito but also the rest of the world. Macro factors have implications that are far-reaching and inherently different for people depending on their micro factors. When thinking micro, think of things like kids, rent, loans, and credit scores that only affect a limited number of people. Meanwhile, macro factors have sweeping effects on many lives and include things like tax laws, anti-speculative legislation, market crashes, inflation, deflation, epidemics. All of these things can be considered macro. Whew. I think we're good. Now, back to the book. Siegel and Yacht identify 4 key factors as fundamental considerations that will affect your financial planning on a micro level. These factors are family structure, health, career choice, and age. By the end of this video, we should be able to identify how each one of these factors can affect your financial thinking. So factor 1, family structure. This is pretty straightforward. Whether or not you have a partner, children, or dependents will change the way that you budget your money. For example, we have Chris out here making $2,000 bi-weekly and saving 70% while spending 30% on things like going out, buying video games, just chilling. That puts his expenses at $1,200 a month, with $2,800 going to savings. Now imagine he has 2 kids who he needs to feed and entertain as a single father. In this case, he has to consider their well-being and price that in. His kids like to eat, so maybe that's an extra $60 per month out of his savings. Maybe his brother can't work for himself and needs financial assistance that his parents can't pay for after their retirement. Maybe his grandparents are in a home that he has to pay for. The more dependents that are relying on him to provide for them, the less amount of money he'll have for himself. On top of that, there's a good chance that by having more dependents, he'll be a lot less likely to take big risks with his money. After all, if Crescito is the only source of money keeping his loved ones safe and alive, there's a good chance he wants to preserve it as much as possible to ensure that he has the ability to continue to provide for the ones that he loves. Factor 2. Health. Similar to that last point, if Crescito himself has personal health conditions that require things like therapy, medicine, or treatment, he'll have to consider both the expenses and the potential for lost income that may occur. Generally, while basic healthcare in Korea is very affordable, late-age chronic illnesses or conditions like cancer or Alzheimer's can be very pricey to address. Accidents that restrict your ability to work or confine your mobility may also have an effect on your employment if they happen to occur. Where you live and the healthcare available to you, as well as their prices, will affect how you go about your finances with this regard. Siegel and Yacht note that the need to protect yourself from further limitations or increased costs may also increase. At the same time, your risk tolerance may decrease, further affecting your financial decisions. Number 3. Career choice. It goes without saying that the career you choose will affect your finances on many levels. First, whether your position is salary or wage-based will determine how much security you will have with regards to your finances on a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. Furthermore, the amount of income you earn may also affect your planning. Other factors that Siegel and Yacht identify are changes to careers, developing additional sources of concurrent income, and movements between employment, self-employment, and unemployment. Whatever it is you choose to do with your money, whether you pursue a large salary, sell paintings once every few months, or rely on your OnlyFans for income, will have significant implications on how you manage your money and consider your financials. Finally, the biggest factor I think that needs to be addressed is age. And I'll let Siegel and Yacht take this one because I'm not entirely sure that I agree with this aspect myself, but here it goes. They state, needs, desires, values, and priorities all change over time, and financial concerns change accordingly as well. Ideally, personal finance is a process of management and planning that anticipates or keeps abreast with changes. Although everyone is different, some financial concerns are common to or typical of the different stages in life. Let's use our buddy Daniel to illustrate these life stages. When we first met him, he was in his early adulthood. According to Siegel and Yacht, some common traits of early adulthood include a lack of dependence, little to no wealth, few assets, small income needs, income primarily being provided by an employer, little to no financial responsibilities, high risk tolerance, and the focus on developing his career and increasing his earned income. As he gets older, he meets someone, has kids, and eventually has to look after his elderly parents. Lucky for him, he declared bankruptcy years ago, and it is finally cleared off his record and he has a clean slate. Rather than get back into options trading and risk his family's resources, he gets to acquiring assets. Maybe he inherits a modest sum from a grandparent who passes, or he gets lucky on a startup that allows him to accrue more assets in the future. The more dependence he has, the more he has to protect. And the more he has to protect, the less risk he's willing to take on. Seeing how much his parents are relying on him in their old age, Daniel also decides to start investing in a retirement fund and encourages his partner to do the same. Let's fast forward again. Daniel and his partner are old but still able to work. The assets they bought years ago are bringing in some extra income, which they reinvest to grow their wealth. They work less as their bodies break down and begin to rely more heavily on their asset-generated income. This is more manageable now because Daniel's parents have passed and his kids are adults, so they're no longer dependent on his income. Without dependence, their spending decreases and they have more time and money to spend on themselves. But once they retire, it becomes a lot more necessary for them to defend their assets because without them, well, they just won't have any more income. They're now extremely risk averse as well because they no longer have time to make back any big losses. So they're no longer interested in increasing their wealth, but focused more instead on protecting what they already have. So to summarize, there are 4 main micro factors that influence financial thinking: family structure, health, career choices, and age. Both family and health affect income needs and risk tolerance. Career choice affect income and wealth accumulation. Age and life stages affect sources of income, asset accumulation, spending needs, and risk tolerance. Ultimately, sound personal financial planning is based on a thorough understanding of all of these personal circumstances and the ultimate goals of the individual. One quick note before we head out for the day. Last episode I suggested that you write down some fundamental aspects of your personal financial situation. Siegel and Yacht go a step further and suggest that over the course of the textbook, you maintain a journal and attempt to identify how each section of the textbook affects you. I don't really think that that's all too necessary, but it is important to ask yourself fundamental questions like, how does where I am in my life affect how I'm dealing with my money? To what extent do the financial decisions that I'm making today consider how much I'll have in the future? And finally, how do your current micro factors affect how you allocate your money or how prepared you are to deal with any changes to your situation? Now, one thing that really changed the way that I thought about the importance of personal finance was an understanding that retirement is not and never has been a function of age. Rather, retirement is a function of your ability to stop working and still afford the quality of life that you desire. Alright, that's it for me. You've been watching Sekkidur. Make sure to come back for the next episode that'll take on the concept of macro factors that affect personal financial thinking. If you want to take a look at the textbook yourself, I'll leave a link to the free online version in the description box below, as well as a few resources that'll help you identify the best way to split your paychecks. As always, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons and share these videos with anyone who might find them useful. Until next time, KFC's batter of secret herbs and spices include 2 cups of white flour, 2/3 tablespoon of salt, 1/2 tablespoon of thyme, 1/2 tablespoon of basil, 1/3 tablespoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of celery salt, 1 tablespoon of black pepper, 1 tablespoon dried mustard, 3 tablespoons paprika, 2 tablespoons garlic salt, 1 tablespoon ground ginger, and 3 tablespoons of white pepper. Eat good, people.